In this desolate world, where everything is in ruins, getting food is very difficult. However, the children of this dark place are always looking for anything that has some value, as they only get food if they have something valuable to change. There is a golem that wanders the deserted streets, and whenever the children find it, they try to offer something of value. In return, Golem gives them food. This golem only appears in the 50 sector, and no one knows where he came from or who is his owner. However, he does not always accept anything in exchange for food. It has to be something he considers valuable. Therefore, children often end up with nothing. Right now, a group of children is frustrated because Golem refused a flashlight they wanted. Even though I accepted one the day before, despite their anger, they know they cannot take revenge as they risk dying. There is a rumor that golems have already been seen killing people on the streets. Then comes a boy with white hair, King. As soon as he sees the golem, he runs to him and offers everything of value he managed to gather. Golem watches the items, takes the bag and turns everything straight into the mouth. Seeing the huge amount of things Ray has changed, all around are shocked. No one has an idea of how he managed to gather so many valuable items. And what makes them even more frustrated is that this is not the first time Ray gets such a big exchange. Meanwhile, Golem begins to overthrow food supplies, and Ray gets enough to completely fill his backpack. The other children observe with envy and anger. For them, it makes no sense that a single boy gets so much food as they continue to starve. Some even consider stealing it, but others soon discard the idea. After all, King has a reputation. People call him the ghost of the 17th Street. While walking from the 50 sector to the 17th Street, King feels the presence of hidden people in the shadows. His senses are as sharp that he knows exactly as they are. Without hesitation, he invites the smart guys to get out of the hiding place, as he realized they were following him for a long time. So, a fat boy appears, accompanied by 6 others. The chubby even praises King's cleared senses, for they tried to stay hidden, but they were still discovered. This boy is called Ron, and this is not the first time he has tried something like that. Ray has warned you first not to cross your way again. Your last warning was very clear. If Ron would do this again, he could no longer walk. But Ron doesn't seem to care. Instead, he makes it clear that he is not going anywhere less than Ray delivered his supplies. Put the food in the bag, bro, threatens Ron, making it clear that if Ray does not obey, he will not leave unharmed. But Ray is not intimidated at all. If someone will end up badly in this story, it is certainly not him. As I said before, Ray has a reputation. He is the ghost of the 17th Street, a white ghost that moves without making noise, and who moves with him is the one who ends in a worse situation. Even so, Ron makes pride speak louder and make a big mistake. Try to punch Ray, but Ray barely moves, just leans her head slightly and easily dodges from the blow. So, take advantage of the enemy's own impulse to make him stumble. But before Ron falls to the floor, Ray holds him by the shirt and punches a devastating punch to his stomach. The blow is so strong that Ron keeps his mouth open, without air, and falls to the floor like a bag of potatoes. Seeing their leader being defeated so easily, the others begin to hesitate, taken by but as retreating now would be a big mistake, they make the worst possible decision. Advance against King. The first tries to hit him with a wooden club, but Hay bends down at the right time and counterattack with a brutal elbow on her face, leaving the bloody boy. Then drop the next 2 with only 1 blow each. For King, a blow per person is enough, and so, all 6 fall to the floor as if they were one. Ray then turns to Ron, that, seeing your sealed destiny, shrinks with fear. My boy makes it very clear that, even if Ron brought some more idiots this time, the result would never change. As he walks toward the fat man, the bastard is cornered. King is now aiming on the legs of this bastard to fulfill his promise. He had already warned the fat man that if he appeared again, he could never walk again, and King intends to keep his word. On the other hand, the fat one pulls a back dagger, trying to threaten King. His hands shake sweaty as he warns Ray not to get closer. He keeps calling the King monster, but deep down he knows that this dagger won't save him. Speaking of monster, there is a reason behind this title that gave the King. Since childhood, Ray has always been different from others. When he suffered serious injuries, he never showed face pain, which made people suspicious. Children his age should cry when they were injured, but Ray became impassive. Even in desperate and hopeless moments, when everyone else cried, Ray was the only one who never felt sadness, despair, repentance, or anger. No tear ever fell from his eyes. Over time, the other children stopped approaching him, finding strange the way he reacted to things. His lack of emotions made him completely alone. The king himself knows how empty he is, and I never wanted to be so. He has always wanted to be a normal person, like any other child. His greatest desire was to learn and feel this thing called emotion. But even after 6 years, he still doesn't feel anything. However, one thing he can do: read the emotions of others. And now, he realizes that the fat man is at the height of despair. Ray reminds the coward to use blades. It is a rule not written there. He asks, did the fat man bring this knife because he planned to stab him from the beginning? Of course, the fatty invents a story, saying that he only took the dagger in the trash earlier, but he sees the lie on time. He doesn't need words to know when someone is lying. Just look at the color of the container inside his chest. This is because Ray has the ability to see a world that others cannot see. Each person has a small container within himself, and whenever he feels an emotion, certain types of mana fill it. Anger, hatred, and love generate red mana. Ridiculous and apathy appear as a blue mana. Joy and excitement result in yellow mana, and there are many other colors, making Ray's world a show of tones that no one else can see. Meanwhile, the fat man continues to let go of threat after threat, trying to intimidate the king. But it is obvious that he is too coward to really use the dagger. King can see the deep mana deep inside the bastard's chest, showing the intense fear he feels. With every step that Ray takes towards him, the dread of the fat only increases. But our boy is ready to give the punishment that this idiot really deserves. Sometime later, Ray finally comes home. As soon as he enters the small tent where others are, he is received by a group of children who eagerly expected their return. The green-eyed boy is Pale, the leader of the underworld children. All children join Ray, smiling and clinging to him happily, proud to have such a reliable brother. Later, while they are gathered, Ray asks everyone to show what they managed to gather. Each child presents the food they managed to get, but it is clear that this is not even close enough to feed the 7 people there. Of course, everyone starts to be anxious, not knowing what to do. It is then that King shows what he got. Seeing the huge amount of supplies he brought, all the children get excited. Some even start thinking that Ray must have stolen all this from Golem. Well, there is a reason why Ray is the only one who can always bring so much food back. Golem only catches magical items that still contain mana remnants. Since these children can't see the mana, there is no way to know which items are still full of it. Therefore, they end up returning empty hands. But now, with plenty of food available, as it is in charge of sharing it among all, thanks to Ray, they will finally be able to sleep with a full belly tonight. Children organize themselves in line, from the youngest to the oldest. The first to receive your part is Josephine, the youngest of the group. While the food is being shared, Ray comes out silently and sit alone, thoughtful. He reflects on the miserable situation they are in. As much as they try, it is never enough. At the end of the day, there is always someone going to sleep hungry. He thinks about taking a trip to the warehouse, where he can get a lot of food. King wants to support these children, no matter the cost. After all, he owes life to them. To contextualize, let's go back a year in time, when Ray was buried in the snow, almost dying of cold. It was these same children who found him and took him out of there. At that moment, Ray had already accepted death and thought it was all right to disappear in the cold. But these children saved him unconditionally. They did not expect anything in return and did not care with retribution. But Ray has a principle. He always pays his debts, be it a favor or revenge. He never leaves something without solving. While he is there, lost in his thoughts, Pale joins him, reminding him that he should also take his part of the food. But Ray refuses casually, saying he's not hungry. Unfortunately, therefore, snoring delivers the opposite. Without saying a word, Pilo breaks his cookie bar in half and gives him a part. At this point, it starts to rain, but it is not a common rain. The drops are black. It seems to be common in this desolate world. It is rumored that this black rain is the result of excessive use of magic by wizards. Supposedly, wizards live in the lower numbers sectors. Paley is convinced that Golem is sent by a wizard, but Ray is not so sure. He thinks Golem can be a machine. Bai quickly disagrees, and it is certain that magic is what makes Golem move. King does not argue, because he has seen with his own eyes the golems using magic. Whenever a golem walks, he sucks mana from the atmosphere around him and pulls it to its core. This mana mixes and is expelled as a black gas, so it is very likely that this gas is the cause of black rain. Ray is convinced that there is a connection between black rain and black gas. That time, he remembers something important. Not saying anything else, he raises his hood and tells Palo that he will leave for a while. Of course, Pale is against the idea. The rain is very strong today, so much so that even the rivers are overflowing. But Ray doesn't care. He needs to do what he needs to do, and With that, runs out, letting Palo sigh and frustrate. Of course, Ray has a solid reason to do this. You see, when it rains, everyone houses in their homes to avoid the rain. They believe that even a drop of black rain can make you sick. However, Ray knows he can protect himself from rain, which makes things easier for him. When it arrives in the 10th 8th Street, also known as the Clean Foot Hector's Ration Warehouse, he sees the bad guys inside having fun, playing, and betting. It is clear that Ray knew that these idiots would be betting on a rainy day. Therefore, he chose today to act, as no one watches the warehouse on rainy days. Gives King the perfect opportunity to enter without being noticed. The place is completely dark, but Ray has a solution for that. Since the air there is full of mana with hundreds of colors, Ray begins to pull the specific colors of mana, mixing them according to the right formula, and lights a fire in the palm of your hand. Although he does not know the exact principles of magic, he can use it very well. Even so, controlling the red mana is a little harder for some reason. With the firelight, Ray begins to check the supply box. As he searched the supplies, a dagger flies suddenly, passing so close that he scrapes his ear. It seems that their presence was noted by the bastards inside the warehouse, and they don't like the idea of someone trying to steal their rations right under their noses. It turns out that these bastards were hidden behind a pillar all the time, almost as if they were waiting for Ray to appear. There are 3 in total, and it looks like they know exactly where Ray is hiding. What is even more worrying for Ray is that he did not expect these bastards to be equipped with night vision glasses. They throw their daggers again toward Ray, but he wipes it quickly, going left. And seeing this, the Skunges with night vision glasses, they are confused, finding insane that a child can divert the knives in this place completely dark. The other henchmen start screaming with one of them to target properly next time. But the poor guy can't even throw his knife before he was hit by a king's punch. At this point, everyone is perplexed with the child's ability to see them in darkness. What they don't know is that Ray can easily see their color of their vessels, that are shining in dark red due to increasing anger inside them. One of them throws another knife with all the strength, but Ray is already prepared to dodge the attack, reading the flow of mana in the vessels through the arteries. He can predict the movement and deviate easily. After dodging, he continues with a kick in the guy's neck, knocking down 2 of them, only 1 left, and the last one also gets a firm punch in the stomach. And that's how the 3 goons end on the floor. At this point, another subject enters the warehouse, and this is problematic, because Ray remembers that this guy is Humphrey, the executive of the Hector Group. The bald bastard is disappointed to see his 3 men fallen, and what is actually making him angry is the fact that they were defeated by a child. Even Ray doesn't want to get into this guy, so he pulls the hood back on his face and decides it's time to get out of there. He runs quickly and tries to punch the guy to push him away from the entrance, but Ray's punch barely causes Bastard discomfort. In response, he tries to grab Ray's head, but Ray goes down in time, narrowly escapes. The bald bastard then follows a punch that makes Ray slide perfectly. The bald man acknowledges that Ray has good reflexes for a child of his age. While Ray realizes that this guy has serious power, the balds start to punches one after another. But King can divert everyone, moving easily on the sides. Even if Ray can divert, he knows he can't continue this way forever. He needs to think of something before being knocked out. This is where he perceives a breach in the defense of the bastard and attacks his chest. As soon as your hand connects, he intensifies the fire in his palm and takes advantage of that moment of distraction to disappear from there as if he had never been there. The other henchmen spread the warehouse, thinking that, as that boy fought with Humphrey, he could not have gone far. Ray begins to worry because, if she continues, she will be caught. But then she notices a stone and throws it to attract their attention. The henchmen fall into the bait and start running in the opposite direction as the king makes his escape. He finally manages to loot the infamous warehouse of the Hector Group, but knows he's dead if he is caught. However, Ray is not afraid of dying. What he fears is that if he is not around, children won't last long in this merciless world. Suddenly, the henchmen reach the king, so he increases his speed, but soon finds himself trapped. Now that it is deadly, the henchmen pull their weapons and tell him to approach and return what he stole, before they start drilling your belly. Since he doesn't see Humphrey around, Ray feels confident that she can win, so she begins to concentrate mana on her fists. One of the henchmen runs toward him, but Ray deflects and punches the guy's chin. Another comes, and Ray quickly grabs the hench with the knife, producing electricity and frying his head, leaving him out of combat. Suddenly, King hears more henchmen approaching, and it seems that they won't stop until they get it. King is not sure if he can use his magic for a long time. It is then that he notices the trash behind him and quickly hides inside. The henchmen start looking for the area, but they find no one but some of their companions. Then they continue to advance, determined to find it, as they cannot lose sight of it. With the heavy rain, the steps begin to decrease, which means that, as much as they try, King is confident that they will not find him there. He decides to spend the night in the trash, because if they follow him to the bridge, the children will also be in danger. With that, he spends the whole night inside the trash. The next day comes, and King wakes up with the light entering the cracks. He leaves the trash, but is immediately exposed by a henchman who is right on the door. Ray realizes, just by the color of his face, that this guy is extremely annoyed and is not sure if he can face him alone, as he is not completely recovered. The henchman finally advances to try to kill King, but this is when King also pulls a knife of hers. Ray shooks the knife against the bastard, but the bastard diverts from the attack and counterattack. While trying to divert, King loses his balance and falls. This gives the bastard the perfect opportunity to give the final blow. Before the brilliant knife reaches the king's eye, someone throws the bastard, killing him on the spot. The gunshot is another sassy guy, who already seems to know Ray. This guy is Niles, the head of Deceit Street. He does not lose a chance to warn Ray about the imminent danger he has just faced. If the shot had even been a second late, Ray would be dead.
Ray, in response, asks why Niles is there, since he usually doesn't wake up anytime soon.
Niles, he responds by stating that he heard rumors that Hector's men were on the loose. He then realizes the food cans that Ray is hiding under the hood of his sweatshirt, and it deduces that Ray must have stolen everything under Hector's nose. Cannot fail to call Ray for the boldness of his attitude. Ray, in turn, thanks. But Niles makes it clear that this was not a compliment, so there is no reason to feel proud. Internally, Ray doesn't know how to deal with Niles, because people like him have so monotonous emotions that his feelings never fill himself completely, so it is impossible to know what he really thinks. Niles, on the other hand, warns Ray to be more careful, or he will end up dying if they continue with these tricks. There are people he should not get involved with, and Ray should know that. But for Ray, risking life is still better than hungry. Niles can't argue against it, so Ray only remembers that now both are the same. Ray saved him once, and Niles in return saved Ray. But Ray says he never intended to save him. He only confused Niles with supplies as he floated through the river. No entanto, o moreno neopode negar o fedo de que acabo sobreviviendo por causa descarado. Mesmo assim, Ray acredita que já pago essa dívida. Para dar contexto ao que estou falando, voltamos ano no tempo. Naquela época, Ray puxou Niles do Rio. Aparentemente, Niles foi executivo do setor 46, mas foi trado. O pelo menos é isso que ele diz. Ray has no doubt that this is not a lie, especially since Niles was the one who taught him as a way of thanks for saving his life. It was then that Ray asked an important question. He wanted to know if he could go into an organization. To be more specific, he wanted to enter the organization of Niles. The only reason Ray wants to join the organization is to protect children. Niles does not give an immediate answer, just walks away and hides behind a wall. Then asks an unexpected question. Asks Ray if he can use magic. Ray gets shocked and asks how Niles knows that. Niles does not respond directly, but internally is intrigued, as he realizes that his assumption was right. He had seen Ray light fire without a lighter. Ray, in turn, continues to ask how Niles knew he had magic. Finally, Niles responds, saying that another wizard told him that there is mana in the air, used for magic, and that few people can detect and use it. King then asks if this wizard mentioned something about colors, but Niles doesn't remember anything about it. However, the wizard said the mana is invisible and cannot be seen with the naked eye. This arouses Ray's curiosity further, because he can clearly see these different colors in the air. Ray asks once again if Niles is not forgetting any crucial detail, but it pisses Niles, who thinks he has said everything he knows and believes Ray is just trying to tease him. Returning to the main subject, Ray wants to know if his request to enter the organization will be accepted, and Niles refuses, without giving an immediate reason. When Ray asks the reason for this direct refusal, Niles once again ignores him. To better understand Niles' hesitation to accept Ray in the organization, it is important to know that all sectors are along the Elton River. If you climb the river, you can reach other sectors and may even escape the slums and find a better life. So Niles believes it would be a waste a boy with so many skills to die there. Now we know the reason for Niles' refusal, although he has not said that directly to Ray. He just asks if Ray has thought of leaving the Sector 50 and even offers help to find a car if he wants to leave. However, Ray refuses the proposal. He has children to take care, but Niles guarantees that he is already planning to open an orphanage, so that Ray can let the children in their capable hands. He promises to give a better life and make sure they don't die on the streets. Meanwhile, Ray can't find out if this guy is lying or telling the truth, especially since his vase color doesn't change at all. However, Ray does not doubt Niles, as this guy has always fulfilled his word. Ray then warns Niles about Hector's group, because these guys seem to be preparing to start a war. Ray knows this for sure, because he saw them receive trucks full of weapons. But it seems that Niles already knew that, not to mention the fact that he has just killed one of their guys, which is a clear statement of war. Ray remembers Niles that people in stores will suffer if he loses the war. Suddenly, Niles' driver calls him, remembering it's time to go. When Niles gets in the car, he reveals to Ray that the place will become a war zone. So Ray is better to look for another hiding place if you can. Before leaving, a small bottle of potion to Ray and tells you to heal your ear with that. Then he leaves in the car. We went back to the 17th Street, near the Central Square, where we meet one of the children in the group of children of the tunnel. The child is excited to see Ray finally back, but her happiness quickly turns into worry when she notices that Ray is injured. Ray tries quickly to reassure the child, crying, saying that he just fell, nothing more. The child, relieved and happy that Ray is not in fights, wipes the tears. Ray realizes this whirlwind of emotions within the child. To think that a single person can feel so many emotions at once is something that never fails to fascinate him. He then delivers all the canned food to the children and asks her to go to the tent first, also to warn Palo that he will return soon. The name of this child is Josephine. While the child follows his way, Race returns to the old woman, Violates, and asks if she told Josephine. Apparently this woman is blind, which explains why she didn't react when Ray appeared. She is a storyteller. She answers Ray's question saying she was just telling the rainbow. Ray kindly warns the old woman to perhaps not tell so many fantastic stories for children because he doesn't want them to develop feelings of inadequacy. Which could make them less happy with the streets they currently live. But Viola believes that children should be encouraged to imagine and dream beyond what is around them. King watches her vase color. That seems to be purple, but he is not sure what feeling this purple color can represent because he has never seen this color in anyone but Viola. King then warns her about the imminent conflict that is approaching and suggests that she consider moving to another street before things get worse. After this conversation, Ray walks away, while Guitar cannot fail to notice how attentive Ray is for a child. The next morning, Ray does some services as a delivery man. When the store owner opens the gate, he is surprised to see Ray. Because I expected Rowan to appear with the deliveries. Ray pretends not to know, but deep down, you can't avoid thinking about how that unfortunate fat has broken both legs, and now it's essentially a helpless person. Ray then politely asks the store owner if he is not planning to evacuate, since there will be no customers if a conflict begins. But the store owner says he has nothing but this store, and that as for war, he is sure it will not happen. Hearing this, Ray gets intrigued and asks the reason. The store owner explains that the group of Hector and Niles are under discussion. So if things are peacefully resolved, there will be no conflict. At that time, the gate of the room where the meeting was taking place, and we see a group of men from Hector's group. The man with scars all over his face is actually the leader of 18th Street, whose name is Hector, the leader of Hector's group. Ray quickly pulls the hood of your sweatshirt over your face. Hector, on the other hand, it is concerned with the fact that a child was working in that place, while all adults fled. He puts his hand on Ray's neck as a gesture of appreciation for the hard work that Ray is doing and still gives some coins to the little one. The bald man, Humphrey, tells Ray to treat himself well, and with that, they go out. But that's when Humphrey perceives Ray's injured ears and quickly turns to him. Ray soon feels the change in the atmosphere and hides her ear, knowing that she was recognized. But before the bald man can react, his boss catches his eye, asking him to stop being there. Eventually, everyone leaves the place in their car. Ray knows Humphrey recognized the injury on his ear, but doesn't understand why he left without saying anything. Ray and the owner of the store then run to Nilo to know the result of the negotiations, but unfortunately, Nilo says negotiations have failed, and the conflict is inevitable. The owner of the store is disappointed to hear this. Nile explains that Hector's demands were simply unrealistic. He wanted the whole organization of Nile to submit to his control, which would be even worse than conflict with his men. Nile apologizes to the store owner and Ray and advises them to become cautious and hide in the refuge. After leaving the store, Ray walks alone through the streets and thinks of how difficult it would be to deal with the streets if the conflict starts. To prepare for the crisis, he decides to gather as much food as possible. He sees Humphrey in the car, which Ray finds it very suspicious because he had never seen a car like the one in the 50 sector. So he decides to investigate. Later, we arrived at the entrance of Hector's group in the 10th 8th Street, where the great boss, Hector, acts like a subordinate before a man who gets out of the car. This man is imposing and is still unknown who he really is. The monkey on his left eye only makes him stand out even more. Not even the king seems to recognize this man. King then notices the color of the man's dark blue vessel and says that calling her black would not be incorrect either. The color resembles the golem's mana when they move. In addition, Ray watches the rings around the man's boat, who seem to be containing a large amount of mana. He is sure this man is dangerous and needs to inform Niles about him. Scene then changes to the 17th Street, where Niles' men are also preparing for the imminent battle. Ray gets there and scares one of the guards, who doesn't understand how Ray managed to get into the base. Ray explains that the gate was open. He asks where he is Neely, and the guard explains that the boss went to prepare for the war and that he is dangerous, so Ray should also leave. Since Niles is not there, Ray decides to convey his message through the guard, but does not know how to explain that enemies have a wizard in their group. Then he asks the guard to warn Niles to be careful with the monculist man. Later, Ray goes back to where the kids are at the camp, but it is outside. Pale asks what Ray thinks about who will win the conflict. Ray is wondering which side to support, especially since the two groups seem to be equally strong. Personally, Ray is hoping for Niles, because he believes this is the only way to ensure children's safety. If Hector wins, street children will be sold as slaves. Suddenly, they hear a frightening noise, which puts Ray on the maximum alert. The scene then quickly moves to the 17th Street, where Niles' soldiers are trying to fight the golems. But bullets have no effect on creatures. In response, Golem releases a huge amount of dark blue magic energy that destroys everything in its way. And as if that wasn't enough, Golem destroys men with their own hands, as if they were tomatoes. The person responsible for manipulating these golems is, of course, the Monocle Man, who is very pleased with his creatures and orders them to eliminate everything there. We return under the bridge, where the children live. Ray plans to join the fight, but Pale quickly holds him by the hand and prevents him from going. They argue who should go to evaluate the situation. The discussion ends up waking Josephine, but Pale reassures her, saying that they will come back soon and that she should go back to the tent and sleep. Finally, Pale gives Ray's insistence and decides to stay with the children. It gives permission to Ray to follow, but asks him not to go very far and come back as soon as he finds out what's going on. Ray promises to get back as soon as possible and finally arrives at the scene. A state of chaos. The result of the battle is brutal. Everything is wrapped in flames, and the soldiers are scattered. With missing members, the red-haired soldier we saw before still seems alive. He reveals to our hero that those bastards brought golems with them, and the man with the monocle was controlling them. He then warns our hero to escape before his life is extinguished. He dies at the moment, being torn in half. This starts Ray's heart, which closes the soldier's eyes and picks up the dagger from the floor, deciding to move on. He is sure that the way things are going, Niles is about to lose. So you want to help you anyway. While Ray is busy, the scene moves to the bridge, where all children lived. Well, it seems that even the children were not spared. They were brutally massacred, and only their pale bodies remained. Josephine is being held in the arms of one of the golems, the responsible for all this killing. The monster begins to gather a dark blue energy in the palm of his hand, ready to launch it against Pale. That, in turn, shed her last tears as she wishes Ray not to come back. The 17th Street from the central square has just caught fire. The man arrives too late at the horrible scene, where he can only see the bodies of Niles' subordinates. Interestingly, your own body is nowhere, indicating that it is still alive. A big crash catches your eye, and when it turns, you realize where the sound came from, running quickly to the tent. When you get there, exhausted from running, you find another horrible scene, the remains of someone right in front of you. Enraged, King prepares to attack Golem with his flaming sword, but the world monster reacts quickly, with his senses sharp, and punches the king's stomach. The blow is so strong that King is thrown into a wall, almost defeated. He does not want to give up and hopes to ensure that his loved ones are safe. At that moment, a voice arises in your mind, bringing out the memories of children, of the people who loved him whenever he returned. For a moment, this gives you strength, but soon these sweet memories become a terrifying nightmare. All those children were brutally murdered. Lorraine, Leia, Corden, Miles, Josephine, and Pale were all dead. Ray, in desperation, cannot accept reality and tries to reach them, refusing to accept the loss of their lives without returning their goodness. But it doesn't matter, because the Silver Boy is about to find his end there. He hears a familiar sound. The same one he heard during the fight is the bastard golem, responsible for the death of all, and now he is preparing an attack to end Ray as well. These defenseless children, like the men of Niles, and even the people on the street, all fell due to this monster. Ray decides to take revenge, no matter the cost. It uses every fiber of its being, every remaining energy, until it gather enough to get up. But his body does not obey until, out of nowhere, a powerful car is launched against Golem, making him throw away. From inside the Sinless vehicle, which rescues Ray. Fortunately, the boy has not suffered serious injuries, but is horrified and discouraged. Upon receiving news from the dead children, Niles, horrified, turns and realizes what happened. He apologizes to the boy for coming too late. Ray doesn't want to accept that it's your fault. Niles, seeing Ray's suffering, hugs him to comfort him, while Niles' subordinates are all dead. The official is undoubtedly Hector, who called the wizards out to kill them. The question now is, what to do? Niles intends to go back to the street to try to find survivors. But before talking about the next step, it is hit by a laser ray that crosses your chest. Ray's eyes are filled with shock when he sees Golem behind him, having just give the final blow to Niles. The poor man has a hole in his chest and is still smiling. Niles collapses in Ray's arms, which calls his name in despair. He doesn't understand what happened, but your heart beats fast as you remember training with Niles and the memories they shared. Ray's heart hits a desire for revenge against Golem, who killed everyone he loved. Golem aims at Ray to kill him, but now it is Ray who is furious, willing to destroy everything in his way. The black rain falls. There was loss, defeat, and guilt, but more than anything, Ray just wanted to escape this horrible nightmare. King wakes up to correct everything, but that was reality, and he could do nothing. Golem pointed his hand to him, aiming to finish the boy. The boy, in turn, did the same, his powers carrying himself in a red glow. Both prepared the last attack and finally fired the two beams. The destructive bundles collided, but one thing was different about Ray. He was an emotion, not a robot. He had reasons and feelings to fight, so his attack was overwhelming to Golem. A storm of infernal fire erupted and swallowed the creature, reducing it to nothing, just rubble. When the attack ended, melted remains were recorded on Earth. Then the boy ran to try to help Niles wake up. He didn't want Niles to die, no matter what happened. Interestingly, Niles still breathed. In his final moments, he was in extreme agony, and never thought it would have a quiet death. But the last thing he didn't expect was to die that day, of all things. Thinking about it, he realizes that he has no reflections on his life, but he calmly accepted that he did a lot of where he began. However, he made the mistake of fighting too much in his life, which made him feel regret and guilt for the situation. Niles was about the boy's age when it happened. Ray wanted to go out and look for medicines in the car, but it was interrupted by the older man, who wanted the boy to do something, leave that cursed place. Niles wanted the boy to live a better life elsewhere. They always had a close connection, like brothers, but now, Niles just wanted the best for Ray, who reached the top instead of being in the back. By saying these words, the last sigh of life was extinguished from the body of Niles, while his hand slipped from the boy's palm. Now he was no longer in this world. Ray had only a few moments to accept what had just happened. In a short time, he was taken by fury and despair, shouting in the rain, feeling the first emotions you've ever experienced. After that, the boy sat near the wreckage and did not move for a while. He was still in pain and shock, unable to describe what happened as something beyond a dream. Just remembering yesterday's horrible massacre, the people he lost and his emotions spinning uncontrolled, something was different. Ray threw some flame on her palm, realizing that her emotions were directly linked to the strength of her fire spells, but also that overdoing it could easily erase your spells, as it has happened now. King realized that he could no longer wait and decided to move the bodies of his loved ones, already cared for. His next mission was to seek revenge, regardless of the moral consequences of their actions. Back to 17th Street, the bodies were being collected. Everyone now knew that Hector had won from afar, and that everything would be much harder from there. The scoundrels moved Niles for not accepting their offer. Ray was already there, having located her targets with a knife in her hand. Suddenly, he was clinging to someone from behind. and instantly cut the man's throat with a single blow. But the blow was not deep enough to kill him, and he tried to negotiate with the boy. Ray didn't care who was fighting. Its only goal was to annihilate Hector's group completely. He cut the man's body with fury, giving him a shock in the system. He couldn't understand how strong this boy was, stronger than before. If he did not respond correctly, Hyo would defeat decisively and end his life. Then the man let himself be stabbed on his shoulder, which was a shock to Ray. But this moment had an equal exchange, for man gave Ray a powerful punch. He understood how foolish and reckless the boy was for risking his life for revenge. That's why, at that moment, the man made an offer that would please Ray. Egghead, the nickname given to him for being the most silent killer, now was an expression of despair, which was proof that he was not trying to fool the boy. Ray agreed to listen to him and knew that Egghead wanted him to leave the industry. His reason was to find the man's brother, whom Hector had sold in the City of Wizards. Hector had promised that if Egghead worked for him for a decade, would reveal the place of the brother. That was the only reason he worked for Hector. And right now, he believes his brother should be about Ray's age. But it is not clear to the boy because he should accept this request. Humphrey finally reveals Ray's secret. He understands that the boy knows how to use magic. This is a shock, but Humphrey keeps saying he was sure after seeing his fight in the warehouse. Despite the small use of magic that Ray has now, it will not be enough to defeat Hector as he is now. In the end, Hector is always protected by an extremely powerful wizard, so the chances of killing him impulsively are practically null. The black, intense mana emanating from that wizard is frightening enough. Humphrey describes this image as a demon. If someone on their side tries to betray them, this wizard freezes them completely. Humphrey clearly remembers a man suffocating to death with a bowl of water placed around his head. This wizard is simply too strong, extremely powerful. That's why he wants the boy to get out of this place for now, so that he can take revenge later when he has a chance. Ray cannot deny Humphrey's reason. After all, he has not yet learned magic and only used what he thought was right. If he was going to fight an experienced wizard, he would have 0 chances to win. The City of the Wizards is near the source of the Elton River, and only wizards can come in there. Humphrey gives the boy all the money he managed to gather during his lifetime. The same is true of the information about your brother's personality and characteristics. Ray is surprised to be trusted with the money. After all, he could always betray Humphrey. But after watching the boy for a while, Humphrey knows Ray is someone who keeps his promises. And he saw enough to conclude that the boy can easily advance to a higher level. Humphrey supports Ray the same way Niles once did. He insists that the boy make a quick decision, because time is short. Ray puts his own condition. He wants Humphrey to take care of the bodies in the tunnel correctly, and then he will look for his brother. It's a simple deal, and Humphrey easily accepts. Ray decides to go, saying she will return to a play. Yes, the One Piece is real. Ray runs as fast as she can to make sure no one follows him. He arrives before Grandma Viola, playing a coin for her and asking for a quick question. The grandmother, happy, asks what the boy wants. Ray wants to confirm whether the story about the rainbow is true. He wonders if he can finally make a request when finding the end of the rainbow. Ray plunges into an old memory that shared with one of the tunnel children. He spoke happily about the history of the rainbow and how anyone could make a request if you found the point where the rainbow touched the floor. King thought about it seriously, for some reason, and this leads him to the present. Grandma concludes that the rainbows exist, even if the request is ignored. The boy feels that there is no hesitation in her voice, always remaining a clear purple, as always. The boy remembers when he asked Humphrey, who was remembered the time they also asked him about the rainbow. This same wizard was also looking for a rainbow, which means they have proof that they exist. The boy asks the guitar if he can resurrect the day when he finds out the end of the rainbow. Instead of giving you a clear answer, she says ambiguously that anyone can fulfill any desire. So maybe it's true. It seems that Grandma is trying to deceive him here, because I really can't say. What do you think? Viola states that the rainbows are hard to find and no one knows where they are. But your answer is enough for Ray, who goes out and asks Grandma to find a new place. Now Ray is on the outskirts of the 50 sector. He observes the coordinates Niles noted, and in reading them, locates the vehicle Niles prepared, a 4-sedan sedan. Just for the case, the boy will take the door handle when one of Hector's henchmen goes out to catch him. He wonders if Niles gave him an order to get the car, and just to provoke the boy's emotions, the henchman asks about Niles's emotions. Ray was confident that he was not being persecuted by any other man of Hector. In fact, one of them reached him. He cannot waste time and grab the door handle to enter. The man runs toward him, and before Ray managed to close the door, the man prevents him. He screams for the boy to open the door. King, already exhausted and with much of his mana spent, cannot make the magic of strengthening work very well. He forces a fire spell, mirroring precisely in man, creating a beam of finger before exploding his head. He kicks his body away and speeds up the car at full speed. Ray will finally try what it is to live outside the 50 sector. After reaching a distant place, the boy stops and examines the trunk of the car. He is surprised to see that Niles was so well prepared, keeping enough water and food supplies in the back will still be useful, as it will not reach the next sector before several days pass that night. Ray made a fire and decided that it was important to get more information about magic in the next. From what you know for sure, Ray understands that there are two forms of mana. The first is the red mana, which can be used without preparation. The second mana requires several colors to be used at the same time. Mana is not easy to manipulate, but after channeling certain emotions, he can use it more easily. Anger is just an example. Your trigger of activation is anger for now, and that's how the boy can launch this kind of magic. Unfortunately, he reached his limit. Whenever it loses its concentration in its emotions, the mana ends up escaping, so decide to play with the combinations, forging several different colors in its palm. The boy watches something interesting happening before his eyes, but unfortunately nothing comes out of this mana combination. Certain types of sisters repel themselves, and combined colors requires immense effort, which also affects their mental energy. But, in response, some combinations work well together. He wants to continue with the experiences, because now his circumstances are different. Ray has every reason to do this. To get what he wants, he goes on to stop at another point the next day. Today, he managed to play with various combinations to cast ice, wind, and earth spells. The boy wonders if he can use the mana inside his body and use it whenever necessary. This would make the conjuration process much easier. It would be something like magical circles around the body of a wizard. Ray is ready to find something like this after reaching the sector 40-9 as to the 50 sector. Let's see how things are close to the bridge. Hector's men are looking for, but they found no traces of Golem. Hector suddenly orders one to hold the tip of his cane. The guy is sweating cold, apologizing to your master for failing on the mission. But Hector is shown as a severe man who does not like men who fail. The poor man touches the tip of the cane and soon feels an electrical pain in his hand. It is quickly transformed into a block of ice as an example for others. Hector pushes the statue down, calling it useless trash. Another of his men report that they found traces of Golem in the area. Hector is intrigued to realize that there is a type of mana in the air, which means that powerful magic has been used. He also feels mana coming closely and goes to investigate the traces. Hector asks his men if anyone really lived there. The subordinate responds that several orphans, street children, live there, but are probably no longer there to avoid war. Hector is shocked. He cannot believe that an orphan used such a magic. Just thinking about it, he falls into a manic laugh. The fact that a boy has conjured a powerful magic and his settings alone seems impossible. Then he clings to the most reasonable theory that another wizard must have come there to destroy the golem. He sends his men to investigate what happened. On the other hand, a part of Hector thinks that if an orphan has managed to do the impossible, then this boy must have the potential of an Archimago genius and could become a force to be recognized. Finally, Ray arrives in the 40-9 sector. Before reaching this sector, the boy had a conversation with Niles before he died. He learned that the sector 40-2 was in a similar chaos state and was much larger in size. The buildings were larger and there were streets, but it was nothing special. However, if you undergo the river, the sectors underwent remarkable changes. This was the case of the 40-9 sector. Ray, when putting his feet there, is surprised by the size of the place. There are also many strange things happening around you. There are no golems in sight, so he wonders if they are restricted only to the 50 sector. The boy goes on, listening to several people talking about his lives. Arriving in the 36th street, he confirms that there are many more streets here. Compared to the previous sector, Ray wants to speed up his step and learn as much as possible about magic, especially about the wizard Hector and his magic circles, as this will be the key to his revenge. In addition, he needs to investigate the prismatic colors and the city of wizards. And you still have to get a job to get money. Although you have Humphrey's money to survive for a while, this journey will need more than that. Suddenly Ray sees a bookstore in front of him, the Veronica bookstore. The name alone already catches your eye. but he had never known a bookstore. Ray doesn't know what it means to remember a conversation with Niles, but he learned many things from him. He has learned to read largely, so he is eager to explore the bookstore. Inside, he sees squares full of letters, something he had never seen before. Suddenly, a voice catches your eye. It's a red-haired girl who accuses him of breaking the window and stealing his books again. She is very annoyed that he appears again to steal her, but Ray doesn't understand the reason for the accusation. He finds that the books are the items inside the store, and the girl reinforces her point, ordering him to leave. He perceives a variety of emotions in it: excitement, joy, discomfort, and irritation. The boy wonders if it is possible to feel so many emotions at the same time. He is a crazy, while Ray tries to understand what she is saying. He calls her strange, which makes her even more angry. She tries to remind him of her father's status. Ray doesn't want to deal with a troubled child, so get out of there. Back on the streets, he watches several boys looking at him suspiciously. He understands, since he is a stranger in that sector. Ray realizes that this part is no different from what happens in the 50 sector. He has already traveled several streets, but found nothing related to magic. He decides to expand his search the next day, but he hears something around. They are the same boys, and now they came to hit him. King is not surprised and realizes that there are 4. They approach the car door with the intention of knocking out it without making noise beyond stealing the keys and food before they can make any movement. King breaks the window and drops one of them easily. With one less, the others are scared. Ray jumps to reach the blue sweatshirt and knock out with a blow to the chest. They are 2 less. The third boy tries to kill Ray with a metal tube, but underestimates the opponent. Ray takes the tube easily and throws it away. The boy, now intimidated, asks Ray not to approach, but King, without fear, orders them to shut up and start hitting them until they are in bad condition. After beating, Ray asks how many streets the boys control. They are silent until he uses a strong tone to demand an answer. With his arms crossed, he projects fear over the boys. He repeats the question and the boys, unable to look at him, they don't want to answer. King then uses more strength and chooses one of the boys. That gives him pressure and confesses that they control 3 streets in the 49 sector from XEI to XXV. King realizes that the boy is lying. For the colors he emits, clear signs of anxiety, discomfort, and fear. King does not tolerate lies and mutilate the boy's hand with one foot. The other 2 watch in panic as the blood stains the floor. After torture a little, Ray focuses on the other 2. He focuses on the weakest and, without having to pain, the boy is terrified and decides to speak the truth. He says they control 14 streets with 50-2 members in total, and the leader is known as the boss, based on an abandoned factory. King did not expect the boys to have so much power. He asks the boy to raise his head and introduce himself. The boy, with a shaky voice, says his name, Nizu. He explains that the boss ordered them to hit Hay until almost killing him and stealing food, money, and supplies. The boss also warned that he is always watching everything, hidden from the king's view. The 4th boy approaches the car, jumping from the roof and trying to attack Ray in the back. Ray, quiet. Feel your mana bubble. It manipulates the blue wind mana and pushes the attacker away without moving a finger. In addition, the wind raised a cloud of dust, blinding the boy with the knife. Then he faint with 2 clean blows. Ray watches the striker bleeding and, without haste, goes to him and grabs him by the hair, and gets it up as if he weigh nothing. King wants these henchmen to return to his boss and return the threat, for he can see everything. After that small incident, Ray continues to research the Zik sector, as well as in its source sector. People here don't know anything about magic. He also learned about books and paper packages, with all kinds of information written inside. If there are so many types of books, there must be some about magic, right? While he walks quietly through the streets, some secondary characters invite you to a less busy place. Ray's defenses get up instinctively, but the secondary characters guarantee that they did not come there to fight. When asked, belong to the same group? The group is the boys he had beaten the other day. The trio sincerely responds that yes. The secondary character number 1. It is quite impressed that a single person has managed to defeat Anthony Horn and Melbourne, half a great way. The boss shares the same feeling and wants to meet Ray. The secondary character number 1 takes a note from the pocket. Unfortunately, the 3 do not know how to read anything. They are instructed to say exactly what is written in the note, but none of them are literate. Losing patience, Ray takes the note from their hands to read himself. While he reads the grade quickly, the secondary characters look at him as if he were a mystical being. Since he can read, he could very well be in their group, because only the boss and someone named Waver can read. The note was simple and confident. ensuring that Ray would never go hungry if he worked for the group. After seeing the note, he turns to the useless secondary characters and asks how they chose his boss. Like most groups in the lower sectors, the process is simple. They choose the leader based on strength. The strongest becomes the boss. Accepting the invitation, Haley had given the way to find the boss of whom they were talking. After a few minutes of walking, they reached the base of the Kedrick group, an abandoned factory. The secondary character number 1 slowly opens the gate, and the tension is palpable. As soon as Ray enters, he immediately feels a vibe similar to the CI organizations of his source sector. A young man, resting near a stake of homeless people, realizes the arrival of guest of honor, wearing a flashy jacket, elegant appearance, dark bags under the eyes, and messy hair. The boss gets up. Ray presents himself and notices something strange in the loading of Kedrick. Although you have already seen mana coming out of debris, Ray had never seen an object emit as much mana as Kedrick's ring. The boss sits again on his throne and offers the opposite seat to Ray as a valuable guest. Ray doesn't have to look back to feel the murderous eyes of the henchman. He does not shake about it, however. Kedrick is just trying to affirm his dominance in his territory. For such a young boss, his leadership is surprisingly effective. Seeing Ray keep calm under pressure, Kedrick is impressed with his steel nerves. When asked where he came from and what the story was with the car, Ray answers sincerely. As soon as he says he came from the 50 sector, the henchmen are surprised. None of them have never heard of someone from 50 before. They have heard of people from above, but never the opposite. Kedrick makes his men quiet with a wave and get even more fascinated with Ray and his story. The boy is more than qualified to enter their organization. Kedrick then explains that he is eventually planning to join a larger organization. They are in negotiations with a super famous organization of the 40-5 sector, known as MK Red. They have already made an agreement to join MK Red's ranks as soon as they reach 60-6 members. For Kedrick and any random 49 random street mouse, this is reason enough to enter the group. It's an opportunity to raise your status after all. Although Ray is quite fascinated by the agreement and by the idea of entering an organization, he cannot completely believe it because he refuses to work for someone weaker than him. By disrespecting Kedrick in his face, the atmosphere in the abandoned factory changes. Kedrick's smile disappears, and your eyes become crazy, staring at Ray. He asks if the 50 boy has just called him weak. Ignoring growing tension, Ray explains that strength determines everything.
From where he comes, leaders are judged by their power, not how they speak. One of the henchmen interrupts and starts cursing Ray. Kedrick's hand, with the ring, quickly approaches and grabs the henchman's neck, squeezing to the point of almost crushing it.
The boss is out of control.
He hates being interrupted by subordinates who speak out of time.
The henchman apologizes pathetically while terrified by a psychopathic boss. From where he is sitting, Ray can clearly see the colors of strengthening magic curling around the mysterious Kedrick ring.
No matter what angle the king looks, it doesn't seem that the killer is using magic. That ring is the only remotely magical thing in this decaying place.
King, bored with the display of violence, asked one of the henchmen when the tantrums would end. Thinking about your options, he thinks he can break the ring if he has the chance. He didn't have to do anything, because the power of the ring was decreasing alone, with Kedrick's calmer personality taking over again. He let go of his painful blow to his neck, scratched his head, and apologized innocently for exalting himself. These sudden changes of emotion are not normal. Now they can argue what Ray meant when he implied that he is stronger than the current leader of the organization. All they need to do is test this idea. Just when Ray reinforces her insults, Kedrick's throne passes a few inches from his head. The power of the ring has taken over again, making the boss completely be out of his way. He even asked his henchmen if they were thinking the same thing. The poor henchman rushed to say that he was the strongest. Ray is now sure that the ring reacts to Kedrick's emotions, seeing how sudden mood change occurs when the ring mana is cut. And Kedrick doesn't even know what that accessory does for him. As Ray wants to see his strength, he proposed a struggle for the leader's position. The loser works for the winner. And so on. Kedrick smiled, obviously enjoying the idea, and marked the fight for a week from now. The boss wanted to do a show of this, fighting while everyone watches, including members from other gangs, so that it would be very clear who is the strongest in front of several witnesses. Before going, Ray asked Kedrick where he had taken the ring from. The chief, in a playful way, he promised to tell the answer if Ray won, but given the weight of the bets, Kedrick wouldn't let it happen. The next day, Ray walked the streets with the thought of the magic ring still on her head. Eventually, someone threw a stone from his blind point. With his supernatural sensitivity and superhuman reaction time, he took the stone before he hit his head. More secondary characters from the other gangs of the 40-9 industry appeared to disturb Ray, even with frightening weapons. Ray was stuck in the middle of a dark alley, surrounded by armed and dangerous gangsters on both sides. They continued to talk about dominating the streets and correct King's attitude. It was already fed up with this useless conversation. If they were going to fight, there was no need to waste more time. As expected, he easily ended up with the clumsy boys, who only knew how to wear rods. No matter where Ray goes, people continue to look for him to fight out of nowhere. It must be because the story of the duel with Kedrick is spreading. Although Kedrick's gang is not attacking as they were ordered, the other gangs are free to do whatever they want. Let a strange walk through your area without being bothered should hurt their fragile pride. They even formed alliances to keep Ray under control. However, everything is going as planned. These random quarrels are making their magic stronger as they get used to combat. It gains more experience and the conjuration speed increases, while mental stress decreases. Taking more fights with all gangs out there is a good choice. That said, there is still a hidden presence following it. Ray pressed this spy to show off. The young man, wearing a messenger cap and glasses, soon realized that hiding was useless. He had been following Ray for a while, and it was already used to gray hair and man's emotionless expression through the streets of the 40-9 sector. Ray had been nicknamed the Hunter. The boy, with a small, unintentionally fighter stance, left his hiding place to face the dreaded Hunter of the 49 sector. Ray evaluated the stranger in front of him. The boy looked smaller than the ordinary gangsters, was alone, and didn't look good at fighting. Walking as I crackled the fists, Ray warned the nerd to take the glasses, so both would not be bothered by their breakage. The boy hurriedly clarified the misunderstanding, explaining that his appearance was not there to fight. He said he was far from being a fighter and that his lean body would be useless in combat. So Ray asked what he wanted. The boy recomposed himself and introduced himself as Phillip, and Thin Phillip has a proposal for Ray. After hearing his speech, Ray decides to follow Phillip for now as they cross the slums of the 40-9 sector. Phillip's workplace is close to the eastern dump. He heard many rumors about the hunter named Ray. For wherever you are in the city, the hunter is the only subject. It seems Ray earned this threatening nickname after crushing several groups of criminals alone. After a few more minutes walking, they finally arrive in front of a building without major attractions. Phillip opens the door, and the harmonious sounds of trade, community, and cooperation reach Ray as a ton of bricks. The place is huge. Phillip welcomes Ray for his venture, Hotel Phillip. Ray estimates that there should be over 100 people inside now. More precisely, 180-6, including those who work outside. Ray also realized that everyone there has something in common. It seems that anyone who enters another more violent group will have difficulties. All are either young or small stature. Phillip explains that the Sector 40-9 contains many mines, which means that many adults die at work, leaving many orphan children and without any support. Therefore, there is always a lot of work in all sectors. Some companies are willing to hire even children, and with this great lack of labor, there are many young people without direction to even the criminals of the streets deal. Then, in exchange for maintaining a monopoly on jobs with some groups and companies, Phillip agreed to pay small bribes to ensure work for his people. He is an intermediary of labor, as it were, in this impoverished sector. Your people have low cost and employment safety. Despite its young age, Phillip is intelligent and industrial enough to create this complex system on its own. He worked hard to establish all this infrastructure as far as it is today. Speaking of his people, Jonathan is one of Phillip's success stories. The boy has a job where he is not beaten every day. It has a community to support it and pay the rent on time. Phillip, always attentive and detailed, takes all what you need, but forgot that Ray was by her side, and her hands automatically sought her notepad and pen. Since the hunter seems quite curious about the hotel's business books, he offers Ray to take a look. Quickly flipping through the pages, Ray finds a page dedicated to him, full of notes Phillip made while following him when he realized that Ray could really read. Phillip felt uncomfortable and a little fearful, recognizing the lack of education of being so curious and sneaky. He apologizes, saying that he knows this is no excuse, but he genuinely likes to watch people. This makes the complete opposite of Ray. To Phillip's surprise, the hunter seems to be calm with everything. insisting that there is no need for excuses. Phillip finally breathes a sigh of relief. Walking deeper into the hotel, the two reach the last room. Bottom. The security guards posted on the door see Phillip and throw a suspicious look at Ray. They insist that they can't let anyone get in. But when they hear that Ray is the dreaded hunter, leaving a trail of gangsters' blood through the streets, the guards retreat scared. Finally, Phillip welcomes Ray to his humble home, which is better than 99% of residents of the 49th sector. When Ray heard Phillip's conversation, he thought the boy was a con artist, but it seems he is serious. Phillip insists that he never lies in his business. His credit is the most important thing. One can always recover the money, but once the credit is lost, it is extremely difficult to recover it. For a boy of the same age as Ray, Phillip is very wise. When Ray asks about the proposal Phillip made before, Nerd shakes nervousness and anxiety. He swallows his uncertainty and raises his head to find Ray's eyes with his clear look. Phillip extends his hand and offers a business partnership with the hunter as soon as he defeats Kedrick and becoming the new gang leader. Ray silently digests the proposal, his eyes watching the man who rotates in the young man's chest. He realizes that Phillip has less black man of fear in his heart, replaced by the golden light of courage. This proposal only works if he wins, and although Phillip cannot exclude the possibility of losing, he firmly believes that Ray has a great chance of winning. When asked why, Phillip simply responds that he is betting on a guess. As he said before, Phillip likes to watch people, to study their behavior, and habits to understand as well as a person is. For example, he realized that whenever Ray speaks to someone, he has a habit of looking at the person's chest, instead of looking in the eyes. My boy is not a pervert. He is only reading the mana. Phillip doesn't know why, so he theorizes that Ray must have some kind of trauma related to people's eyes or faces. Anyway, it is very clear that he has a good eye for observation. Fascinated by this, Ray asks if he noticed any more thing. He really wants to know about other habits that Phillip realized. Phillip lists some more. He noted that Ray always takes the first step with his right foot to turn a corner. It may be that he is unconsciously preparing for a possible meeting with enemies, keeping his right hand ready to react. Phillip talks about some more detailed Ray habits, and even he was impressed with how much he had observed. So far, people saw him superficially. They said he was scary, that there was something wrong with him, that he was the cold, expressionless boy who was afraid of everyone. Even now, besides anger and sadness, he does not know how other feelings are. This encounter with someone like Phillip seems to be a tip on how it can grow emotionally as a person. Meanwhile, Phillip is busy listing Chief Kedrick's habits, hoping to help increase the chances of victory. Kedrick tends to have emotional explosions during the fighting, while Ray is meticulous and calculates everything before attacking. It is a good combination. Before Phillip can make his conclusion, Ray has already accepted the proposal. Payment and final details can be left to Phillip's team. All that Ray asks for his new business partner is that he takes it seriously, although this is already expected. He also has another condition. It seems that Phillip has access to many connections, and connections mean information. So Ray needs him to find something important. 2 days after closing the deal, Ray is back on your camp, checking the car for repairs and maintenance. His mechanic is curious about Ray from the 50 sector. Observing the state of the vehicle, it would be plausible to believe that it crossed a desert. Considering that Phillip sent the best mechanic they have, Ray is being well maintained. When the mechanic asks him to pass an English key and a Sixum nut, Ray uses the magic of the wind to gently place the objects next to man. He has practiced precision control, and improvement in his ability is visible. After a few more minutes, the repairs are completed except for the overheating of the engine. There was not much to do, but the mechanic changed the cooling liquid for a much better, so Ray's car should work well from now on. The mechanic secretly brought the most expensive replacement he managed to find in the store where he works, so there should be no vehicle problems for a long time. Hotel people make a point of going beyond when it comes to Phillip's requests. He is their savior. After all, without Phillip, many would be out of work, so everyone tries to repay what he did for them. As nerd and eccentric as Phillip is, you cannot deny its popularity among its people. Before leaving, the mechanic gives Ray a note written by Phillip, as it would be difficult to memorize the entire message. Phillip wrote everything. Finally, the animated mechanical departed with all his equipment. Back to the office, Ray's last request was about wizard information. Phillip had heard of people who use magic before and promised to gather information about anyone suspected. Given Phillip's vast information network, it should not take long. And as promised, the nerd delivered fast. In just 2 days, he got a ton of information to reanalyze. The first on the list is about the Wolfman, a 40-2 baker on the 2nd Street. Witnesses swore that they saw the guy carry a heavy bag with one hand. It is probably nothing. The next is about Andrew, the Kinney store clerk, from the 8th Street. He ate dry wheat bread without grimacing. Definitely suspicious. He can be the king of the throat. When I through the list, Hades' hopes finding a clue about wizards and magic began to decrease, but then a line of text caught his attention. A track that seemed to be worth investigating. Hayes still checked people who were the least likely to be related to magic, scratching those that were just a bit strange, but who did not have the rings in the chest indicative of magical power. After exhausting the list, Ray got one last track, an incident where a steel pipe fell from a roof in an empty commercial district. He was a man from 30 to 40, often seen going from one place, from top to bottom, with food in his hand. On that day, a strong wind blown enough to divert the pipe from his trajectory. When the man almost avoided the accident, he did not seem surprised or shaken by the alleged near-death incident. Ray was convinced that there was a great chance that this man was a wizard. Walking to the commercial district, Ray is in a family area, the bookstore he had spent on the first day. Outside the store, 2 boys were crouching, ensuring that the store was closed. These 2 were throwing stones into the windows every day, tormenting the owners and slowly forcing them to stop operating the business. Ray heard them arguing about receiving twice as much payment if they could convince owners to sell the property. They could throw stones on the 2nd floor this time, stop attacking the store and start messing up with their house, so they could torment and force the owners to leave. When one of the boys prepared to throw a heavy stone, the 2nd floor window opened, revealing the young lady with red hair, shouting. She heard everything they were saying and was furious. The young lady cursed the boys, shouting to leave. Ray saw the yellow light of courage and conviction spinning on his chest, but her heart was taken by the black man of fear. Even the boys realized she was just trying to show herself brave. His words were hard, but his body trembled. Without warning, the boy finally threw the stone. Fortunately, your target was not good, and the stone hit the wall. Even so, it shook the young lady. It was widely known that the bookstore had only children and some sick old men inside, so they were an easy target. Fighting fear, the young woman continued to be brave and scream at the children. The 2 psychopathic boys continued to attack with stones, this time aiming at its face on purpose. When Ray was about to intervene to prevent her from really injuring herself, he was surprised by the brilliant light he had never seen before someone else. The young woman extended both hands as her man danced around her palms. A chaotic wind intercepted the stone that came toward him, protecting her from a direct blow. The psychopathic boys were surprised. The stone fell back on the floor, without hurting the young woman's face. With eyes full of tears, she revealed her true magic nature. King had been looking for wizards for a long time, and found one for pure coincidence. The psychopathic boys, with their atrophied minds, could not understand what has just happened, and they thought it was all imagination. They tried to attack again. King was certain that he had just witnessed his first concrete track on magic. She came from a young woman visibly trembling and trying to be brave in front of bullies. The psychopathic boys attacked in unison with stones in hand. This time, they doubled the strength of the attack, aiming to ensure the damage. Not expecting continuous attacks, the young woman stopped at the window as an easy target, knowing she couldn't block the stone. She closed her eyes, accepting her painful fate. Fortunately to her, another wizard was hidden around the corner. Ray waved his hand, stopping the stones by manipulating the mana in the air. He used even more of his control and power, causing the stones to return towards the psychopathic boys, hitting them hard enough to make them unconscious with a single blow. Finally, King left the alley to check the fallen idiots on the floor, looked up, and made eye contact with the young lady in the window. It's been a while, but their second meeting was much more interesting than the first. Ray gave another beating in the psychopathic boys, aiming at their arms and legs to make sure they no longer cause problems. The young lady invited the king to enter and formally thank him for the help at the right time. He said it was not necessary so much formalism. Besides having something I wanted to ask her. Coincidentally, she also had something to ask him. At the same time, he asked if she was a magician, and she asked if he had used magic back there. Their enthusiasm made them both stop for a moment. The sudden proximity made the young woman blush. She cleaned her throat and invited him to get in her house to talk more. Upon entering, Ray's eyes traveled the atmosphere. It was the first time he had entered a bookstore. Then everything seemed strange to him. Finally, she introduced herself as Veronica, and the bookstore was named in her honor. Ray, returning to courtesy, he presented himself briefly, feeling ashamed. Veronica lowered her head. She apologizes for screaming with Ray like a crazy last time, saying that it is only under much stress because of those psychopathic little people. Ray didn't care, thought it was just a misunderstanding. After apologizing, she keeps thanking for the help, saying he could have been seriously injured if it wasn't for Ray. Honestly, Ray just wanted to take a look at the bookstore. He wanted to get some magical knowledge, but finding a magician personally was a much larger gain than he expected. Veronica was surprised. In this place, people are usually receptive to recognition anyway, but Ray is an exception. Sitting at one of the tables, Ray asks where she learned magic. She responds casually that it was her grandfather who taught her. Hearing this, knowing that there is another magic user in history, King is even more curious and asks to meet Veronica's grandfather. The young woman, full of energy, thinks there is no problem. Veronica perceives something worrying on King's face. A slight cut, by bleeding a little. He must have been scratched by something, considering he was beating around. Veronica worries that he may have an infection if he does not treat the wound. Then she reaches her hand and gently holds King's face, moving slowly and carefully. She summons a hot white light that surrounds her skin. After a few seconds, the scratch disappears, as if it had never existed. Surprised by this application of magic, King rises and enthusiastically asks how Veronica did it. He wants to know how she moved the white mana, turning it into a soft light and used it to heal. As much as he concentrated, he could never move his white mana. He realizes, white only reacts when someone is considered or dedicated, and also appears when someone sacrifices himself for others. All these complex and altruistic feelings are like a foreign language for the emotionally incapable young man. Veronica can't explain her technique in detail. She only knows how to use healing magic. This is all. She doesn't even know what he meant by white mana. Ray remembers having asked Niles about the colors he constantly sees, but that guy has never heard of something like that either. As far as Ray knows, mana is not visible to the naked eye. Not even the wizards can see her. While Veronica cannot understand the concept of white light, she is familiar with the element of regeneration. The element she has now used is widely known as the regeneration element. Usually, the cure uses only one element, although it can add 2 or more auxiliary elements to amplify or change the effects. There are more than 20 types of elements if we consider only those that occur naturally. If we count the most specific and abstract elements, such as amplification, disorder, manipulation, and others, there are at least 100 different elements. Just listening to Veronica's detailed explanations, Ray feels that his horizons expanded a lot. Maybe talking to her grandfather can bring more clarity. Unfortunately, Veronica's grandfather is sick and can't get out of bed most of the time. Still, Veronica wants to check how he is about to see if he is awake and can talk to the king. As she climbs to the second floor, Ray is free to explore the bookstore alone. All types of literature are organized on the shelves. For what you heard, books are very expensive items. King sees his dirty, tired, and dust-covered hand against the smooth cover of a book and hesitates. He thinks that playing in these valuable items with his hands can decrease his value. On second thought, the last time he took a shower was when he rained clean water. That was a long time ago. This guy smells like mold. He has become accustomed to his own smell and does not feel discomfort, but now it is concerned that others feel. Veronica probably realized the smell. Maybe she has a bad smell, or is just politely ignoring the smell of King. Again, his eyes wander, and he is at a table full of books arranged as diaries. One of the covers catches your eye. The Study of Elemental Distribution by Sector, a book on the expansion of Black Rain. Veronica goes down the stairs and is startled to see King, who is right behind her. And he whispers to her who is still there. She thought he was gone, because she took a long time to go up. She gets embarrassed, and he thinks he must have been looking at the store while she was absent. He asks if she has books about magic, since you didn't find any. Veronica asks if he knows how to read the titles, and Ray surprises her by saying yes, but has not found books about magic. He also asks how her grandfather is and can meet him. She replies that he is resting and suggests that he will come back tomorrow. Ray agrees. While Ray is leaving, she asks why he wants to know about her grandfather. He replies that he is looking for the prism. When he opens the door to leave, Ray is sitting in a coffee. This information was given to her by Johnny. While Ray looks at the note, Johnny appears with a free meal and delivery to Ray. She says it is because of the house and that it is an honor to serve it, since he is the hunter. Ray thanks and asks if the information she gave is accurate. She confirms yes, for it has observed this man's routine for a while. Johnny is called back by his boss, who is angry with him for doing nothing. It's 18 hours, and Ray needs to wait another hour for the mysterious man to leave the apartment. So, he decides. While Ray ends the meal, the man leaves the apartment and Ray sees a red aura around him. He thinks it's your chance to get the information you need. He runs to the man's door thanking Johnny for his food and finds that the door is locked, as expected. King knows he can't go back, so think of a solution. His rainbow mana flows through the lock and opens the door. Ray is surprised, because she didn't know she could do that, but she wastes no time and starts looking for information. He reads a note that the man was writing, saying that he might have been expelled from the 60-6 organization. He also mentioned something about a red blood stone to be stronger than he expected. Ray opens a box and feels a strange feeling. He sees red stones in the box with red mana flowing from them. He thinks the stones are similar to those of the Kedrick ring, but the mana flows more easily and is stronger. He puts the stone in his ring and creates the brightest red flame ever made. While he does this, he hears the man coming back, which surprises you, because it has not passed or 15 minutes. The man enters talking alone about how he forgot his wallet, who is getting old and that his boss abandoned him. Hayes hides behind a door. The man takes his wallet, and when he is about to leave, he remembers that he forgot one more thing. He approaches the door behind King, looking at him with bright red eyes, saying he forgot the poison to rats. The man faces Ray, who is hiding behind the wall, with an evil look, saying he also needs the poison for rats. He asks Ray if he thinks he didn't know he was hiding there. Ray pulls her sword and cuts her into the man's face. The man is surprised and bleeding because Ray cut his face. He gets angry that a boy cut his face, and the blood is entering your eyes. Ray thinks it's your opportunity to control man and get information from him. When Ray prepares for another blow, the man stops with naked hands, with red mana flowing from them. King is surprised by the man's ability to use mana to stop the cut. The man curses King, saying that it is disrespectful to point out a knife for an adult. He says he was being easy with Ray, thinking he was just a child, but says he will kill Ray, given how strong he is. He goes towards Ray to attack him. Ray also for the man's attack with red man in his hands. The man is surprised by Ray's ability, and Ray thinks he remembered the colors, patterns, and proportions and copied them to defend himself. He continues to attack Ray angrily, but Ray overcomes him, causing various cuts in his body and face. The man realizes that there is a killer who can copy magic, but I did not expect the killer to be a child. The man thinks Ray was sent by his boss to kill him and take the red stones. He gets furious and his whole body is taken by the flames. He tells Ray to warn his boss that Walter, the blood, I will soon visit him, and that he will regret having abandoned him if he can leave it alive. The man wants to burn Ray and make his boss recognize him. Ray knows that the situation is dangerous, for Walter's mana is spinning intensely and leaking from his blood vessels. If he did not use his sister to protect himself, he would be in trouble. The blood-covered Blood-Eye challenges Ray to try to kill him again and attack him. He blocks the attack with Mana Rainbow and asks Ray how long he intends to play on the defensive. King knows that he cannot approach man, for he is surrounded by fire, but his defense will not last forever. Ray thinks she needs to extinguish the flames before attacking. He surprises the man by surrounding him with water and using 2 magic techniques at the same time. Ray prepares a water attack and advances with all the strength against man. Walter, when hit, realizes that perhaps he is not the killer. Ray defeats him and begins to bleed through the nose, thinking that these are the effects of using magic with all mental capacity. He believes his magic has become faster and easier, but if Walter was so strong for him, he can't imagine how strong man is with the monocle. He believes he needs to get stronger to perform his revenge and knows he has time for it. He regrets not having taken all the stones, for he did not know that things would take this course. After defeating Walter, Ray returns to Veronica's store that greets him kindly and receives him. She realizes that Ray changed her clothes and asks what happened to her old clothes. Although Ray thinks he got rid of them because Walter would recognize him by the clothes, since he didn't see Ray's face in the living room because it was dark. He replies that he only got rid of them. She tells her she told her grandfather about her visit, how the king saved him with magic and that he is looking for the rainbow, but it says nothing more. When they walk toward their grandfather's door, 2 boys look at Ray with anger, and Veronica tells him that they are his younger brothers. Their grandfather brought them from the orphanage and adopted the 3. King asks if he went to teach them magic, and she is amazed, asking how he knows. Ray says it was a guess, because she had already told her that grandfather teaches magic. They arrive at the grandfather's door and Veronica presents Graham, grandfather, Ray. The grandfather asks her to leave a little, and Ray sits next to him. He first thanks Ray for removing the children, saying it was his work, but couldn't do it for being sick. Ray realizes that his grandfather has 4 rings, indicating that he is feeling various emotions. Ray thinks this would be difficult for her grandfather and hard to read. The grandfather tells him that he heard that Ray has questions to ask, and Ray replies that she has been looking for a wizard for a long time. Graham asks if Ray is not a wizard, because he heard that he uses magic very well. Ray replies that it still has a lot to learn. The grandfather laughs and asks where Ray is, what is received by a silence. The grandfather thinks Ray has a long story and lights his hand, asking to play a game with him. Those who win can ask questions to the loser. While this happens, Ray can see and feel the mana between them. The grandfather tells him that there are multiple elements in magic, and these elements can combine to create new magical elements. He created a maintenance element that would prevent external factors from interfering among them. Ray raises his hand and asks his grandfather what the other element he is seeing, as he can see 2 colors. Grandfather thinks that an ordinary wizard could not identify this throughout his life, but King. He got and questions his luck, since it was so many orphanages to look for talent. But now that he doesn't have much life, the true talent is before him. Ray asks what this other element is, and the grandfather tells him that he will have to play the game to get answers. Graham creates a sphere, and whoever pulls the sphere to themselves with magic can ask the questions. He says he will put her closer to Ray to make the game more fair. Ray barely raises her hand, and her grandfather has already taken the sphere. Ray is shocked, thinking he's fast. The grandfather asks Ray where he learned magic, and Ray replies he was self-taught. The grandfather is surprised, saying that King surprised him twice in a day. King question, and self-taught wizards are rare, and the grandfather tells him that he needs to win the game to ask more questions. They prepare for the second round, and Ray loses again. The grandfather says that the goal of this game is to see how someone deals with the mana. Ray gets annoyed, and he thinks that, this way, he will end up delivering his information and receive nothing in return. When they prepare for the third round, Ray changes his tactic and wins. He says there is nothing in the rules about hindering the opponent's life. The grandfather tells King to ask any question, and King asks what mana is. The grandfather replies that mana is an element that all things are done. One cannot see it directly, but it is possible to perceive it through secondary things, such as lightning. He also says that very few people can feel mana, and that it is not necessary to use magic to feel it. Just realize it. King asks his grandfather manipulating mana with magic are 2 different talents. The grandfather replies that yes, that wizards who are honest with themselves can use mana better than others. They continue to another round, and King wins again. The grandfather is surprised that the maintenance element is the hardest to understand, but Ray is managing to understand this in real time. Ray asks his grandfather what the rings are around the hearts of the wizards, and he explains that they are vessels for mana. Depending on the character of the wizard, these vessels collect and refine mana from the air, distributing it as elements. King asks if these vessels make the mana easier to use, and the grandfather replies yes. Also, if the mana is constantly extracted from the air, this can cause mana poisoning. People are affected in different ways. Some are sad, some start to laugh, and some are extremely annoyed. This can result in permanent mental illness. Ray thinks it's immune to mana poisoning because it doesn't feel emotions. Use atmospheric mana with emotion can make the user crazy. He asks his grandfather if someone is immune to mana poisoning. That would be a great advantage. Grandfather finds the idea interesting, but says he never saw someone use mana that way. The grandfather asks if King has a dream, and he replies that he wants to kill someone, but also save someone else. The grandfather says he has heard people say they want to kill, but never they want to save someone. He asks if Ray would like to learn magic from him. King is surprised and wonders why a man with his grandfather's abilities would teach an orphan from the streets. The grandfather replies that he wants nothing of him, and King agrees. The grandfather asks Veronica to come and explain why he took her and the brother of the orphanage. Veronica says it was because he wanted to leave a legacy of his knowledge. The grandfather tells Ray that he heard he wants to find the rainbow. All have different theories about the rainbow, but they all converge on one thing. Whoever finds the rainbow will become like a god. Therefore, the monocular magician is also looking for the rainbow. Veronica asks what a god is, and her grandfather begins to explain that God is the creator of all things. When a stone breaks the window, Ray quickly catches the stone and at the same time saves Veronica to protect it. He thinks the bookstore's bullies do not seem to stop. The grandfather thanks the king for saving them again, but he says he can no longer do that because of his health. He asks Veronica to bandage on the king's arm, who was bleeding because of the shards of glass. King asks his grandfather about the bookstore's bullies, and he says he received an offer to sell the store, but refused. He thinks it is these bullies that are doing this, as he opened the store to help his students and complete his research work, which is the work of his life. He liked to meet people in the store, but as he is getting old and sick, he can no longer protect the store and plan to sell it to ensure the safety of his grandchildren. Veronica begins to cry and argues that she doesn't want him to sell the store or disappear. Ray will find Phillips and eventually comes across the Cedric gang. He sees Cedric hitting someone in a container. As he approaches to confront him, Cedric asks what Ray is doing there and if he also has something to do with the injured man. Pointing to the injured person,